First of all, I would like to thank Adam for the invitation for this very inspiring place and community. So what I would like to present here are some ideas on a certain relation, what, as I see, links theater, and especially participatory theater, to political action. The claim that theater is political must not surprise anyone who has some knowledge on the theory of theater. From Plato through Schiller to Brecht, this claim is the most common of any theoretical statements. What makes the difference is the answer to the question, what kind of politics and what kind of political action? Now, politics can be understood in many different ways. And the same applies actually to the term action. But political action, in my mind, is always emancipatory. So let's see what are the meanings, the main meanings of politics. There is a narrow meaning of politics that is representational or party politics. In fact, in ordinary Hungarian language, that is the only meaning. What I would like to suggest, is that there is no genuine political action in party politics. So winning an election does not achieve anything new in the political community. And then there is a broad meaning of politics, what I would like to define as pertaining to a political community. And naturally, we have to inquire on what is a political community. So first of all, we inherited the notions of state and politics from the ancient Greek political thought, so it's worth to take a glance on them. What we can learn from the ancient thought is that a political community is neither an economic nor a racial community. Plato, for example, states that political community starts where economic community ends, where the principles of economic justice cannot be applied. Social justice takes its place. On the other hand, Aristotle is very precise on that racial distinction does not constitute a state. Only social distinction does. So this is why the barbarians does not have a state. I mean a polis, of course, a city-state, a Greek city-state. They differentiate only racially on racial characteristics, but not social characteristics. So, for a very first definition of political community would be these two characteristics, political, and we will elaborate on it later. So, a political community is never an economic community nor a racial community. Now, why do I say that there is no political action without emancipation in the field of politics? Not because every political phenomenon is emancipatory, of course, but because most of these phenomena does not qualify to be an action. A political action, in my mind, rebuilds the political community itself. So what I would call a political action is not reproductive, but productive. A reproduction maintains the pre-given social order. But, and of course, production does not only maintains, but somehow goes beyond it. So, but what is the production on the field of politics? I think it is a production of a more powerful political community. The empowerment of the community is the emancipation of the community, and it is opposed to the power of the few, of the elites. This is why a political philosopher like Jacques Rancière restricts the meaning of politics to emancipatory politics. While I think the term politics has to be used in a broad sense, political action, on the other hand, must be restricted to emancipatory politics. Now, as I see, there are two meanings of empowerment of the society. There's a possible meaning when we are broadening the community by giving voice to the voiceless. This is what Rancière calls a disagreement in politics, in a narrow sense, politics in a narrow sense. Basically, that is what one used to call a social struggle. On the other hand, there is another meaning, and that is integrating the community by the means of consensus. So the other one is a dissensual emancipation, while this is a consensual emancipation. A disintegrated community is on the brinks of a civil war. To avoid disintegration, the administrative tools of the state are usually insufficient. For example, community development is an alternative form of the empowerment of the political community. The community development as a movement is originated from this insufficiency of the state. Participatory theater, drama pedagogy, and similar movements, in my mind, are primary cultural tools for a consensual empowerment. They are not powerful tools for the social struggle, but they are for the consensual action. They aim the integration of the society, just like community development, only by different means. Even if they are limited to a modest objective like conflict management in a small community, for example, a classroom, they have this empowering ability. In case of more elaborated forms of drama pedagogy, these intentions are usually explicit. Moreover, one can say that the drama is one of the most adequate tools for this emancipatory action. What intimately links politics to drama, in my mind, is imaginary action. Politics is imaginary, and political action must be imaginary as well. Reason has a limited use in politics. It lacks the power of imagination over the multitude of people we call society. Now let us return to the definition of politics by a political community. A political community most often, but not always, defined by a political border, that is a state. It does not necessarily, though often, defined by a nation, and never by race or economic unity. But as we can see, all of these are negative definitions. A possible positive definition could be that a political community is imaginary community. It is common, after Benedict Anderson, to call nation as an imagined community. What I would like to suggest is that any political community is imaginary. Naturally, not every imaginary community is political, but every political community is imaginary. A political community is an imaginary community of a multitude of people what goes beyond racial and economic community and constitute an integrated and structured whole. Now, imagination has a world different to that of reason. Arguments, demonstrations, and in general reasoning does not belong to this world. What is not to say that imagination is irrational. On a side note, it does not say either, that does not mean either that it would be unrealistic. What I would like to say is what I would call imaginary community is not an unrealistic community, but so to say, a community of the body instead of the community of the reason. This is a Spinozist definition of imagination, and I wouldn't go into it, but that's the difference, not unrealistic and not irrational. So this rationality has a number of different principles and can be traced back to these principles. We will see some of these principles later, but in general, we can say that imagination tells or shows something that reason would prove. Let us take the example of storytelling. Telling a story always involves fiction. Basically, one cannot tell the naked truth, cannot tell the naked truth. One has to use a narration. And narration fictionalizes. First, it always evaluates the events from the point of view of the end of the story. What leads to this end is important. What does not lead to this end, is unimportant. Second, it introduces a causality that might not be present between the naked events, the events external to the narration. This is why it is often possible to tell different stories of the same event, and similarly, this is why the same event can have different meaning to different political parties. On the other hand, every act of imagination has some truth in it. There is no such thing as total fiction. Even lies have to have some truth in them. In general, when we think that someone is utterly mistaken or deceived, we are usually exaggerating the power of deception and simply don't understand the real motives behind some people's political behavior. Donald Trump or Boris Johnson does not simply deceive people, but exploit the very real social problems of some people. In politics, this is why I do not believe in totally controlled public opinion. Every political deception, be that a mass media campaign or an attempt of total ideological control, has to be based on something the people hold to be true. Participatory theater or drama pedagogy is intimately imaginary. It deals with this very same medium as politics. Narration, pictures, dramatic actions are the common ground on which both politics and theater is built. Thus, the empowerment of a community by the means of drama hardly can avoid to be political. But how can be theater emancipatory? I think it is easy, so to say. Whenever it takes into account its own consensual nature and the nature of imaginary, that is, it is just as much fiction as truth, it becomes emancipatory. Because the real political issues are not the ones in the news, but the ones what are in the imagination of the people. Thank you.